وخمار شوي area crossing.
Artinia Shinla, everybody. This is your host, Padre Gosi, aka Shattered Sin. Tonight is an update episode. Unlike the previous lore episodes, we'll be talking about the recent work that's been done on the Threefold Seer series, what that is, and a little bit about it, and also about the work they'll be going into it and how important this debut novel for the Shattered Press is for everybody itself. So without further ado, let's talk a bit about what is Threefold Seer. For those of you who are just recently catching up, Threefold Seer is a new IP, part of the Oak Cross trademark that is being released by Shattered Press this year. It's also part of my major project work as a publishing student here in Oxford Brookes University. And one of the major things I hope to do with this is prove that Shattered is a viable team, but also show people what we've been working on for the past few years. This includes Land in the Stars, Altair, the Nyla Clarkson novels for Agyra, and also a future series including the Codex of Amazonia and the Age of Skysail. Now, Threefold Seer takes place in a world known as the Shattered Crescent. It is a shaman punk fantasy, which means that the primary forms of technology and magic are based around these individuals known as Stone, Sky, and Sea Shaman. They have the ability to speak to animals, to see the currents of their given element, and also to wield certain things in battle. Shaman are a bit different in that their magic tends to be a little bit more indirect. They can commune with spirits, they can interact with the natural world. Imagine if benders couldn't just simply bend things, but could also control things. They don't actually bend their element. What they do is they have the ability to direct it and control it in a limited fashion. Only the seers can actually manipulate elements on a grand scale, and this is what makes them the voice of the goddesses in this world. The Shattered Crescent is primarily based on Polynesian, African, Melanesian, Aleutian, and Chinese and Eastern Asian myth. The stories itself are highly influenced by the legend of the three unifiers over in Japan during the Sengoku Jidai, and basically it's as non-European as you can get. This was a challenge for me to try to write something that was not your stereotypical magical anything fantasy. I wanted to make something from the ground up while also grounding it in some, pretty interesting tropes. This novel series focuses instances of a lot of basically a decent view of imperialism, colonialism, and also the racism that is inherent in how people talk. Not just on how they look, but how they talk. One of the major differences between two of the major groups, the Skybound and the Whale clans, is the difference of language. In fact, if you were to visit the Crescent and you were from anywhere in this world, you'd probably say that a lot of these people look quite similar. But there's a lot of cultural and also linguistic differences based upon what part of the world and which islands you come from. Now, the particular individuals of this novel are the seers. They are people who are chosen by the goddesses, the three goddesses, the goddess of clear skies, the goddess of the solid stone, and the goddess of the calm waves, also known, I think it's calm waves, though that is one of her many names. Now, this series begins after an advent known as the Songbirds, and will have a small little excerpt for all of you, which I will be reading, and then it takes place 70 years later during a time of warlords, tyrants, and secret conspiracies. It focuses heavily on characters of traditional non-conforming gender identities, and one of the main characters is trans, another character is androgynous, and the third, well, honestly, Itayoji is genderqueer, much like Nyla. But the thing here is that this is a novel series which was meant to really kind of push my personal boundaries, but also establish a new comfort zone as a writer. And for Shattered, it is part of her ongoing interest in expanding the voices that we see not only in fantasy and sci-fi, but in writing in general. Luckily, being here in England, I've seen many instances of greater voice for non-binary and queer individuals, but at the same time, there's still a lot of problems that could, be solved in the coming years. Anyway, back to the Threefold Seer. Now, the initial book is complete. The manuscript for the first draft is complete. It is currently gone to our substantive editor, that is Zen K. Rue, a.k.a. Jordan Varjassi. She will be going over it. and checking anything for plot holes, characterization errors, and descriptive problems. Her job is to clean up the my voice and help make it so that the overall flow reads better. Then it will go to our beta editors, who will check it over for perspective and see that it actually is enjoyable for our target market. And then it will be going to Robin O'Callaghan, who is my mother, who is a professor in marketing, communication, statistics, and many other things, and has a pretty damn good grasp of proofreading. So, and after that, we'll then be commissioning some artists to produce this, and hopefully, if we can get enough time, we'll be doing an individual print run for hardback, and hopefully paperback. Nice thing about being in a publishing school is I've actually learned how to price that, so I'll be using that as all part of my major project. Now, as an instance of this book is going to be part of a trilogy which I plan to publish over the next 3 to 5 years, known as the Nightingale Trilogy. It'll be the first in a long arc of stories, which we hope to do in a dynastic fashion, kind of similar to what Ken Liu is doing with the Dandelion Dynasty series. Now, without further ado, I want to quickly illustrate that the major influences for this novel in general were Magical Girl and also the Zelda series. I got the idea after watching a lot of Steven Universe to do a non-binary sort of major character hero type, and then also after really reminding myself what I liked, I wanted to kind of go with this pseudo I love Zelda because it's generally pseudo-European in a lot of designs, but at the same time, it has established itself as its own kind of fantasy aspect. The costuming and the feel for Zelda often matches up many different cultures and has its own unique feel. This is something I wanted to do on my own, and also after being in Maui for a long time, I was kind of sad to not see more work that really takes influence from Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. You know, these areas which have fantastic mythologies that no one really seems to focus on. And even though there are plenty of Filipino sci-fi novels or novels written by people from New Zealand and other countries, there is a propensity in the Western Hemisphere to mostly focus upon novels that are written locally. And again, we're still having some problems with a number of POC getting their voices out or seeing non-European based fantasy. Luckily that's changing, but it is changing slowly. I don't want to get into explaining it as an author of privilege, but I wanted to take a crack at it as someone to try to maybe, not only expand the mythology of the Oak Cross, but also expand the kind of characters I can write. Anyway, so without further ado, I'm going to be reading a few lines from the prologue, which is known as Where It All Began, and I will only do a short excerpt. And then hopefully within a few weeks we'll have this excerpt up on our website so you can check it out. Okay guys, here it goes. Sing, little bird, or I will end you. Dilan Dile. Ho there! The words sprang forth from the man's mouth as if possessed with an unrelenting fever. His eyes were the color of sun-baked earth, and his skin a fine teak. His face was covered in whorls and swirls of pattern marked in black and yellow ink, and his right ear bore a ring of gold. The one who he was talking to was not so different, a short man with determination written on his face, and a long clangai spear in his hands. Both men were corsairs, pirates of the great bay. Both were there in the grand capital of Bloodlily that day, to see the day that the great king broke them from bondage. "Aye, what you want?" the man drawled as he lifted the long harpoon-like spear in both hands and gripped at the haft with bitterness. This was not a man who had come for joy and luxury. No, this was a man from the outer islands. His accent was all wrong, and his eyes were too. They were wild, and kept a notion of sanity only held together through sheer stubbornness. "What be your name?" the first man asked in retort, with his drawling speech betraying his Corsair roots. It was a lazy sort of wording, like a half-drunk rambling fool who had only been hit too many times for pawing at serving girls. No, it was not the language spoken by the nobles of Gaugea, whose tongue danced with the high speech of Skeo. The second man was from the north, likely, one of them backwards leopard lovers. "I be Wink," the second began. "Some call me Wink the Lost One." His words were prettier than the first, and he didn't favor a high-slept drawl. In fact, his words were far more eloquent. somehow attaining a higher stance and register than the way the man dressed. Both were attired in the typical dress of the men of the skybound kingdoms that swept across the southern isles. A high neck coat set over a pair of long pants that were folded to appear almost like a kilt. The strange mixture was often mocked by those bleeding whale riders, but then again, the goddesses would burn them straight to the deep abyss. "Well then, Wink, call me Sly," the first man answered, his animated face splitting into a jeering grin as he then pointed to the great citadel which rose in front of them. "I take it you fought with Nilandile in the war?" Wink asked Sly, as they were both now quite decently known to each other. "Yes," Sly said, switching to a more coherent register, his lips smacking as he pushed a bit of dried seal meat into his wry maw. "I fought for the North," was all Wink added in agreement. An agreement which did not come from anywhere, but appeared to materialize in their now partway convoluted conversation. "I see," was all Sly grunted. The two walked down the wide, carven sea-stone lanes of the city as they passed through a gate set in a high, peaking arch. Twin guards in tall, conical iron helms, and wearing the two blades of the warrior class greeted them. Wink glinted at the weapons that made up the two blades, the Slainte spear and the Dlinu, half-bent dagger. Both were common sights on the soldiers across the entirety of the isles that made up the Shattered Crescent, but only warriors and shamans usually bore both in the characteristic cross formation, with the Dlinu strapped over the Slainte long half. "Hi-ho!" jeered Sly as he passed. The man had only a small straight dagger, probably a dirk of some sort, and yet the two warriors gave a salute by crossing the arms and bowing. Sly must be a drunken tart of a connected Skepson. Wink followed after the man as they traveled past carts being pulled by mules and through a covered market. Bloodlily was famed not for its trade, but for its fortifications, and yet it was able to produce a sensible status of commerce, while retaining a questionable name. Sly led them straight toward a growing crowd gathered in a square set before the grand citadel of three triangular towers that rose up to form the central fort of the ruling king. In the square were many people, all skybound, or Ilirami in their native tongue of Scale. The typical skybound hair colors of red, black, and even a few dark browns were seen matching their cinnamon-colored skin. Normal-borns. Wink's sense of humor was already on a tightrope as he watched as three trussed-up fools were brought onto center stage in front of the crowd. Front and center, before the three, was a man wearing a long cloak made of paradise bird feathers, red and orange, that cascaded down his shoulders and was then beset by a high-crested crown upon his head. The crest swept over his head and around it, and then moved back toward in a slight point. More feathers covered the crown, which was itself carved from a great golden-painted cypress found in the depths of the kingdom's inner forests. That resplendent ringmaster was Nilandile, king of Gaugea. Wink hated the man, and knew that Sly liked him. Beside the man walked a woman carrying a bone-handled Slainte, a shaman. He could barely make her out as the crowd surged toward the king, and several guards, like the warriors from the gate, appeared to hold them back. A great swelling feeling rose among the several people as the king raised his arms outward and opened his hands. "My subjects!" he cried, and suddenly the crowd silenced. Not a peep was heard as Wink suddenly felt himself being pulled closer so he could finally make out the poor victims of Nilandile's sideshow. Sly brought them up to the front as the guards parted to give them just enough room to step close enough to watch. The three figures were bound on the stage, appeared as women in different states of dress. One wore the girdled war dress of a leopard rider from the Clouded Mountain tribe. Another was dressed in a sealskin with male coverlets of a skybound woman. The last was tall and wore a thickened sealskin armor kitted with a helm made of bone. A whale rider. "Seers," Wink said as he lifted a hand and crossed his arm over his heart to affix himself with good luck. The most powerful of shaman were here? "Yes, brought low by Nilandile," Sly said with a laugh. The women were bound, and yet their eyes were defiant. One was gagged, and one of the guards nearby bore several cuts, and another was half beaten. The patriarchal nature of the skybound often placed men above women, but a seer was generally considered more powerful than any warrior. They were the living voices of the goddesses on the mortal plane. "That is not possible," Wink gasped. "To bring down the divine could not be." "I broke the songbird," Sly said as he chuckled. "Well, not me. Dilandile's shaman, that woman, Ifsi, she did it." Sly then pointed toward the woman who was standing beside the king. A pair of inky black eyes stared back at Wink. The king started to talk, and Wink could not hear him. Darkness clouded his vision, as the sound of crying and weeping filled his ears. Before he could remove himself from the dark eyes, the seers were dead, their bodies broken on the ground, blood scattering from their bodies. Ifsi, the king's shaman, was standing beside him, her long, bone-handled slangai covered in their blood. "So ends the age of the songbird," the woman said. And although a din arose around them, all Wink could hear were her words. Words that heralded an end of peace and the future of war. Alright, everybody, I understand that this has been kind of a rough excerpt, and I probably messed it up a little bit, but I really do hope that you enjoy this novel. If you are interested in being a beta reader, just send an email to shadowedsin@gmail.com, or even better, send an email to daswyrd, that is DASWYRD@gmail.com. Say you want to be a beta reader, and we'll hook you up and let you know about the schedule. Anyway, guys, I understand this is a short episode. I usually ramble on longer, but we got so much going on here at Brooks, and I have so much to do, including fixing up the production schedule for this book. I hope you enjoy, and I hope you really want to read this book when it comes out. Have a nice day, and as they say among the Amazones, Vihenshus, spirits to you.